All right, welcome everybody to Legal Tech Week for June 18th. Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. This is Bob Ambrogi. I am the host of this. I also host a podcast called Law Next and write a blog called Law Sites. Got a small group here today, so we'll have a more intimate discussion. But let's introduce today's panelists. Victoria, you want to kick it off?
Hey everyone, and happy Juneteenth to everyone, just to put that out there. But my name is Victoria Hudgins. I'm based in Philadelphia, where I'm a reporter for ALM, where I usually write for legal tech news, and I cover the legal tech industry, how technology is impacting lawyers and cybersecurity.
Thank you very much. And Niki?
Thanks. I am Niki Black. I am the legal technology evangelist with My Case Law Practice Management Software. I am a legal tech journalist. I write columns for the ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and also for the My Case blog. And I had said I was going to bring my bird with me today, but he's in the other room, so I lied. I'm birdless.
And out for the holiday today is Joe Patrice. Joe?
Yeah, Joe Patrice from Above the Law, echoing the happy Juneteenth greetings. This was a day off for us at Above the Law, and then every law firm decided to announce bonuses in a row, so we ended up working all of it anyway. So hopefully, maybe we'll get Monday. We'll see.
And last but not least today, Zach.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Zach Warren, editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News, work with Victoria. You'll also see me on law.com, The American Lawyer, Corporate Counsel, all those ALM brands.
And our other usual panelists are all off in different directions today. Hopefully, some of them will be back next week anyway. So I don't know, since it's an untraditional day anyway, should we just forget tech and talk about associate raises? Joe, what the heck?
Yeah, seems like it makes some sense. I mean, maybe I'm struggling here to try and be relevant. I think there is a tech angle to the way the raises are working. I do think that, because if you think about it this way, see here, I'm spinning. 2020 should have been a horrible year that would have left big law in real trouble. But instead, thanks to the work from home infrastructure and all the technology that we've amassed and the embracing of that by law firms, they had record years. And that's why everybody's getting giant raises right now. So there is some aspect to this that is a tech story. The next wave of it, from my perspective, is I think in the fall, we're going to start having the showdown between the big law firms that expect everyone to come back to the office and the ones that aren't. We've already got some people on the 3 and 4 days a week world, others who are, we need everybody back right away. I think that's going to be mostly a battle about commercial real estate, which is why I think it's sad that Steve's not here, because he always has commercial real estate insights. But it could also be a question of how much these firms really have embraced the technology that they invested in. They felt it worked well enough for them to bring in record revenue, but do they feel like they really trust it enough to move forward into a 21st century office?
Well, that was going to be partially my question too, because I'm very admittedly not as up on the happenings as Joe is, as my colleagues at The American Lawyer is. But it would seem to me that if this is an arms race between different firms, there's only so much differentiation that you can have in associate hiring in the salaries. There has to be some other caveat to get new lawyers in, and the ability to work remotely would seem to be a very obvious one over the past year. So it kind of surprises me that there aren't more firms looking to go alternative routes and have different carrots as compared to just going higher and higher and higher with the salaries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we are seeing that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I know one of my colleagues, I read one of their articles yesterday on the American Lawyer. They talked about the firms that can't afford to match these high salaries, that they're saying like, okay, we're not increasing your salaries, but we're allowing you maybe to be a little bit more flexible with your hours. Like you don't have to reach as high as hours. So that's a little bit of flexibility. And I kind of wonder, will like remote working, like that was already before the pandemic, that was kind of like a perk that law firms would say like, hey, you don't have to come in every single day, you can work remotely. So it's kind of interesting. Will they kind of leverage like, hey, you can work remotely. You don't have to come in 5 days out of the week. You know, your hours are a little bit reduced. Of course, you're not making as much as like, big law, but kind of like you can have a little bit more work-life balance. So it'll be interesting if that'll be some of the like points they try to say like, hey, stay here or come to this firm.
We've talked before about whether there's any danger of there being sort of tiers in firms of those who work from home and those who don't work from home. Is there any sign that that could become an issue in terms of compensation?
Yeah, I mean, and not necessarily in the big law side of it yet, but yeah, we're going to see that because we're seeing, I can't remember who it was, but we've seen a banking discussion begin of if you're going to be one of these people who doesn't come in all the time, don't expect a New York salary. If you're theoretically a New York worker, but not working in the 5 boroughs, we're going to dock what you get paid. Now, that's not law yet. That said, that's one of the big clients for law. So how much do they mimic that? So we'll see. Right now, it feels like I don't think you're safe to move to Denver if you want to keep working in New York City, but you're probably safe to move to, I don't know, suburbs outside of Philadelphia and work in New York City, for instance. Like you're able to be that kind of a distance and probably be safe that you're not going to have to struggle to get into work when you need to be, but we'll see.
How about the Berkshires? I was just talking this morning to somebody who bought a second home in the Berkshires and works in New York City. But trouble is there is sketchy internet access. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's it. We sort of sucked the tech angle out of that story as much as we could, I guess. There's a tech angle to every story, really, these days. But that actually kind of segues perfectly, Niki, into the story you want to talk about this week. Or doesn't it?
I thought we can make it. We can force it. I wrote about this and submitted my article, but it is not going to be published probably until next week.
All right, well, forget it. We'll talk about it next week.
But the article I linked to talks about it. So, but I didn't write it. But it's this idea that in New York, we're on the way towards repealing the in-office requirement. Typically, and traditionally what has happened in New York is that it's judiciary law. I'd have to double check. You think I would know it because I've written about this for years, but there's an in-office requirement, meaning that if you are licensed to practice in New York and you want to practice in New York, you have to have a physical office. And that's Judiciary Law 470, Section 470. And that's been really problematic. So it doesn't allow people to virtually practice in New York. So be located somewhere else, be licensed in New York, and represent New York clients in New York. It's prohibited them from doing that. They've had to have all these workarounds. So leasing co-working space, and you can't have a post office box. It has to be an actual address. So they have to have like co-working space and receive mail. And there's all these requirements, and it's actually an office, not just some sort of like workaround. And there's this whole argument about that being a problem from a technological standpoint, meaning now that it's technologically possible, why do you have this antiquated requirement? But there's also a very practical problem with that isn't often discussed, but I personally have encountered, which is I think it disproportionately affects women attorneys. So oftentimes I did this, a lot of women attorneys end up doing it. You have some kids and you end up either just taking a break from the law or working part-time or hanging your own shingle so that you can kind of manage your young children and your career and still try and stay in the loop so that you can get back into things. And when you do that, if you don't have an office and you're working from home, you're required to, with this in-office requirement in New York, on the attorney registry site, put your home address if you don't have anywhere else, and you can't use a PO box. So you're putting your home address publicly on the record. And you represent clients, and clients sometimes get mad, or the other side gets mad in custody issues or matrimonial issues, and you don't want your home address being out there. And
right.
it was a big problem. I personally had to deal with that and figure out how to do that when I had hung a virtual shingle in 2005 and was doing contract work for other lawyers before I became a counsel to a DWI defense firm in town. And so there's a very practical effect that it disproportionately, I would argue, affects women attorneys that are still trying to keep themselves in the mix so that they can then expand on their career a little bit more down the road. So in any event, they're looking to repeal that. And it's gone to the Senate and they've handed it off to the Assembly. And the pandemic was a big part of what was the push behind this. It's also just the trend that's happening, but the pandemic accelerated those trends, the ethical roadblocks, if you will. A lot of them are getting moved out of the way because the pandemic showed that you can work from anywhere. You can represent people from in one state where you're licensed, but be in a completely different place and still provide them with sufficient, adequate, or not just adequate, but represent them well. And so I thought it was really interesting to see that New York is finally sort of seeing the light. There have been major lawsuits, Carolyn Elephant's written about them, that people have not prevailed on in federal court disputing this requirement. So I think it's exciting to see that happening, and you're seeing similar things happening sometimes on a temporary basis and other times on a full-time basis. It talks in that article about Florida, and you're also seeing the same thing in DC, where people jurisdictions are starting to allow people to work, practice law in a certain jurisdiction where they're licensed, but be physically located somewhere else, but use technology to get the work done.
Is there any doubt that this is anything other than a protectionist law? I mean, is there any rational basis for having a law like this?
That's what every attorney I've talked to that supports it. It's all about keeping the New Jersey lawyers out, keeping the other
there's
lawyers.
A good argument.
But it's about keeping the people from the other states, making sure, or from having people have these virtual offices that will compete with them on a so that they can be more economical in the ability to efficient in the way that they practice law, and therefore compete in an economic way. And so it really is all about people feeling like there are people from out of state coming in and trying to get their business. And so New York lawyers have really fought it, and it's an antiquated, outdated rule, and it needs to be gone. So I'm glad to see that there's movement on it.
Well, that was my first thought with it, is especially as you see somebody like Fisher Broyles, a virtual firm, enter the AmLaw 200 this year, something like that opens some eyes, particularly with those major New York firms of, oh, these people are doing things efficiently in a way where they don't have to buy Wall Street real estate. How the heck are we going to be able to compete with that? A protectionist law is one way to do it. So it's not a good thing necessarily to fight, but that's from a very cutthroat business standpoint, I can see the logic there. It's just that I tend not to go with the cutthroat business logic. Actual logic, I think, should prevail in this case.
Yeah. Many years ago, I practiced law in the Virgin Islands, and the Virgin Islands used to have a 1-year residency requirement in order to be admitted to the bar. And there was no question. The only reason they had that requirement was because they didn't just want lawyers coming down and sort of setting up shop as a tax write-off for vacations or something like that. And that got struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court as unconstitutional. So I'm surprised that none of these other challenges, these other challenges aren't, the other rules are not as strict as a 1-year residency requirement, but still, I'm surprised that there hasn't been some success in these challenges.
And do you guys think, I kind of wonder, will this have a part in, since New York is a very large legal market, will this have any part in maybe law firms saying hey, coming back into the office, especially if they have a New York office and they can't hang over the head, hey, you have the office, I guess you have an office space there, but just you guys think that could maybe impact some large law firms saying, okay, you don't have to necessarily come into the office?
Now that you say that, I don't know about not coming in, but it did strike me that there are big player firms that don't really play in New York, that this is the sort of law that might change, especially with the remote, how they play in New York. Like if I'm a big firm that doesn't want to enter New York per se, or would love to, but like it's just too expensive. It's like, oh, now I can just get one floor of decked out cool conference rooms and have all my California lawyers who are admitted to the New York bar be my New York lawyers. Maybe they will do that, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like it's
The expansion
you can
without
function. Yeah.
Yeah, the expansion, you don't have to worry about the real estate, and you don't have a law saying like, oh, you have to have a physical office here, and just like, no.
Yeah.
I keep wondering how far we are from it getting to the point of just getting rid of state bar admission requirements altogether. To me, it just doesn't, there's just no rationale for it anymore. I mean, whatever rationale there ever was for it, why not, have either some national test of a lawyer's competency to be admitted to practice law, or maybe we've all discovered the bar exam is just a stupid idea all around and doesn't really work. But
well, New York's going the other direction. New York is recommending pulling away from the coalescing around a national test to do more testing of inane, obscure New York laws, which is like, I wrote an article about this actually. One of the few non-bonus or not bonus, a few salary related articles I've written in the last couple of weeks was about this New York report, which, on the one hand, I kind of respect them for pushing back against the kind of machine tide of we're just going to move towards this UBE and everything's going to be great and just don't question us. And they are pushing back against that, but I think they're losing a lot of the point of why we have a problem with that sort of test by turning it into even more arcane test, which was the opposite of what the point was.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on that? Should we move on to Zach, law firm innovation or law firm innovators, or
yeah, the transient nature of law firm innovation, I suppose. It was announced earlier this week. So a little background for those of you who don't know David Cambria, very big name in legal operations with Archer Daniels Midland for a number of years, went to Baker McKenzie in 2019, very heralded move, brought in Casey Flaherty, brought in Jay said, we're going to build something great here. And it was great for a very temporary period of time. But then Casey and Jay both left earlier this year. And it was announced earlier this week that David himself is going to PwC, which is, I imagine, a big thing in and of itself. We've talked a lot about the big four and their move into legal here. But I thought it was kind of interesting more from the law firm perspective of they put a lot of dollars in both salaries and technology into building out something there. And Baker very much still has an excellent technology department, but it's interesting how a lot of these big names, I guess you'd say, within legal technology kind of hop from place to place to place, not really staying too long. I'm not quite sure why. I've had some off the record conversations, which basically amounted to, we came in to do a job, did that job, now we're going to something else, which is very fair. But I would think from the law firm perspective, you have this talent in-house, you can find other stuff for them to do. I would think it's worthwhile for the firm to do so. So I guess it's just an open question in my end, why exactly firms aren't doing that and trying to retain this tech talent for as long as possible.
I tend to think that these innovation initiatives are the same as the diversity initiatives in law firms. They're just big PR plays where they love to trumpet that they're doing it and bring in people to make it seem like it's going to happen. And then they don't support the people that they bring in to actually accomplish much of anything, and everyone leaves. Now, no one's told me that's why they've left. I'm certainly not claiming that's the case. This is just a supposition, but I think that they just don't get, generally, I'm not speaking about that firm in general, but they don't get innovation, they don't get diversity. And so they're not providing the support that's needed to actually accomplish any of these initiatives. And it probably just ends up frustrating people and they bail. Well, I could be wrong.
That's the thing. On both ends, it's particularly if you're dealing with corporate clients are getting smarter about this. They know what they're looking for in D&I initiatives. They know what they're looking for in innovation initiatives. And a lot of times it's not necessarily what the firms are giving. So you would think if you kind of want to align with what your clients are saying, you'd want to push forward with this and actually work with them to have something that sticks, but apparently not. I don't know.
I thought, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it just reminded me like a couple of years ago, I think I wrote about legal technologists and how that's emerging in law firms. Just kind of like, that's a new type of professional in law firms. And like, you have to build, law firms are figuring out how do you pay them? How do you make it so like law firms, it's a place where you can innovate. And I think that's maybe like an issue where you just maybe hit like a brick wall and you're just like, you're a technologist, you want to use technology and just kind of like, okay, you have this one product and you're working along. Some people brought up that non-lawyers can't have like an equity stake in a law firm. And that's maybe why you see some that leave, because they just say like, hey, I can't make as much money or people won't take me as seriously because I'm not a equity partner. But I think maybe it's about like innovation. It's just like, law firms aren't that breeding ground for like software and innovation, like just people saying like, hey, I need to do certain things, or I have a billable hours that I need to meet, or my book of business, and they just don't necessarily want that software and technological innovation. So maybe it's that, and also kind of like, hey, you came in and do the project, you accomplished it, and now you can leave now.
Yeah, Roy Strom, who was on this show a few weeks ago as a panelist, wrote, I thought, a pretty scathing piece at Big Law Business this week about this. Zach, you kind of alluded to the idea that, it was good for a year or so, and then who knows what happened. Part of the problem is we don't even know if it was really good for a year. We don't know anything about it. I think that's kind of the point he makes. He writes, I'm going to quote right from his article, since he couldn't be here, but he said, there's been no public accounting of what was or wasn't accomplished by those who left Baker McKenzie. I doubt there will be, because that's not the way it works. When the Big Law innovation title changes hands, the closest you might get are some vague comments years down the line. And then to Niki's point, he quotes Rob Ciccone, who was the director of Seyfarth Lean Consulting, their kind of a big innovation effort. Rob, after he left that job, wrote, quote, most incumbent law firms do not innovate for measurable results like their corporate clients. They innovate for show. So I think that really goes perhaps to, we don't know. We don't know, but it sure feels that way.
Yeah, it is one of those things, kind of back to Niki's point, where is the show really working? Like, that's the sticking point for me in all of this. And I guess it's partially me being a little deep in the tech world and actually seeing the focus from a lot of technologists, a lot of IT people, a lot of vendors on outcomes, like a lot more than you even saw 3-4 years ago, which is a good thing. That's what the focus should be on. But from people who aren't living in this world, I don't think they necessarily see that outcome focus. They see
Right.
all of the tangential, it looks good to clients, we can market this, we can say that we're innovative and differentiate ourselves without necessarily actually having to do that. And then when the rubber hits the road and that shiny new car smell wears off, it's, oh, we actually have to go through with this now? Well, why would we do something like that?
Yeah. I think the way the show works is sort of in the attracting of talent. When David went there, when Casey and Jay went there, these are super smart people, super talented people, and you feel like, if they have vetted this, if they've done their due diligence in terms of taking the position, that there's a real commitment on the part of the firm to do innovation or to be innovative. And there may in fact be that commitment, and maybe they've all left for other reasons, better career moves, whatever. But when it falls apart, when those same people then leave and I'll leave within the span of a couple of months of each other, then it doesn't look good. The show falls apart.
Yeah. And getting back to the big 4 point, because that was something, so Dan Packle wrote about it for the American Lawyer, and that was something that pretty much everybody that he talked to, including Steve Embry, who's not here, kind of touched on, is you're just looking at scale that's different if you're going to a PwC, and what not only they're going to be able to pay David Cambria, but also the toys that he's going to be able to play around with, because somebody like PwC is going to be able to invest in these initiatives so much more than even a top AM law firm like Baker. So it makes sense for him, not only probably from a monetary standpoint, that's just speculation, but also in terms of career development and what he's going to be able to do in his new place.
Yeah. And given that Steve is not here, we probably should point out that he gets to say, I told you so here, or something, because he, I don't know if your piece mentioned this, but Roy also mentions Steve Embry wrote a column back at the time when David Cambria joined Baker McKenzie, predicting that the pairing would either succeed or blow apart in less than a year. Well, it lasted a little longer than a year, but so good for Steve. Victoria, what do you got this week?
It kind of segues nice into like implosion, maybe that's going on for Nuix. They're dealing with some issues. Yeah. Nuix is dealing with some issues. They're facing 2 investigations from Australia's financial regulatory and their police agency, stemming around like their governance and documentations of shares, and just kind of like the dates. There's gaps in the dates and discrepancies, and just wondering what's going on with that. And earlier this week, Nuix announced that its CEO and CFO were stepping down. The CFO was terminated through via mutual agreement, and the CEO is resigning, and they're looking for his replacement. And just kind of like, I wrote about that, and then I reached out to some PR people, just wondering like, can a Nuix or a legal tech company facing this type of backlash and bad press, can they rebound from this? Will they lose, especially with legal tech buyers, and legal tech buyers being mostly like lawyers that are risk adverse, like, will they still want to continue using a software? And they said like they'll be able to bounce back, like especially because this isn't really affiliated with like a data breach like we've seen years prior of like a data breach. And I think, was it TrialWorks? They were dealing with the issue, and users weren't able to access their files, and it was like a practice management platform. So some people had to, I think, issue like delays in their legal proceedings because they weren't able to access their client data. So PR people are telling me like, oh, it's not like that at that scale. So you just have to keep the communication going, and, show that you, are a resilient company, you abide by ethical matters and everything. And they said like letting go of your top executives is actually a good sign, because it shows like, oh, we're committed to being ethical and all that. So it'll be interesting to see, and just kind of like, will some legal tech buyers say, hey, I'm not going to use them, or will it be hard for them to bring on more clients? That'll be interesting. Like they've had in the past not been able to meet like their sales forecast, and it kind of be interesting, like, will they also struggle with sales now with all this bad press?
Yeah, that will be interesting. I mean, how a company whether a company springs back or not from that is always interesting. I mean, it was a little over a year ago, well, more than a year ago, I guess we're talking about the huge ransomware attack against Epic, and that kind of shut them down for a month almost, I think it was in the end, when, for a period of time when clients just could not access their files, and they had projects going on, deadlines to meet, e-discovery matters going on. But I think they handled it well in the end in terms of the outreach to customers and the recovery, and they seem to be, by all accounts, doing well and having rebounded successfully from that.
Yeah, one thing I do think definitely helped Epic in that situation was the constant communication. They didn't shy away from anything. They said, yeah, this is a thing that happened. We're going to continue to update you as we try and work our way through this. obviously a little self-serving here.
After I broke the story, they weren't communicating until I reported it.
Well, fair, but I was about to say, eventually, like when you reached out, when all of us here reached out, they actually did acknowledge it and start talking then. So I think talking to press actually was helpful in their situation. And I think that was in Victoria's story. One thing that one of the PR people said too is, especially in a small, tight-knit community like this, stuff isn't going to stay a secret for a long time. Like, people are going to talk. If a system is down, somebody's going to notice it very quickly, particularly on a well-known company like Nuix. So it's better to kind of get in front of the story in that way, as compared to just letting it fester and letting people talk amongst one another and really start that chain of negative, bad word of mouth, which is particularly in legal what really can kill somebody.
And I kind of wonder, like, because Nuix is one of those rare like public legal tech companies, and it's like financial issues, and I couldn't, trying to do some research, I didn't see too many other legal tech companies that dealt with this, because I think because for the most part legal tech companies stay private. So it's kind of interesting, like it's something new for legal tech buyers to even have to deal with like, oh, shares and allegedly like shares being sold, and the documentation not adding up. So it's kind of like, okay, it's not impacting the product, but it's just like, it's kind of something new for legal tech as well. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, will consumers care too much? Like, it's interesting, but like, will that make me not want to use the product? It's just kind of, we don't really have any past experience with that.
Yes, my takeaway.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, my takeaway from all this is that I can start a legal tech company and commit massive amounts of fraud, and maybe I'll still be able to keep my business going. So exciting news.
You're not supposed to broadcast that before you do it.
This is recording. I see it in the top left part of the screen.
Yeah, I was hoping everybody will not take this out of context and know that I was joking.
What were you?
Yeah, all right. That's a message to the FBI right now.
All right. Well, I'll talk about the kind of a quiet week for me. I didn't get a lot of writing done this week because of other commitments. But one thing I did write about was the Wolters Kluwer Future Ready Lawyer Survey Report. That's a long title. But this is the third year they've done this survey. They've been doing it for a couple of years, and the message of the survey tends to be, law firms that have been early adopters or that have embraced technology do better than law firms that have been slower to adopt or that have not adopted. And there's pretty much, the survey tends to back that up year after year. I don't think they're coming out trying to necessarily prove that point, but that certainly has been the premise of the survey. But I thought what was interesting about it this year, and in some ways this kind of reflects some of the other things we've been talking about today. We have talked so much on this panel and in general about the degree to which the pandemic has been, an accelerant of the adoption of technology, an accelerant of innovation in law firms. And yet here we are talking about, well, maybe law firms aren't really embracing innovation, and maybe law firms aren't really fully embracing work from home. And I thought what was interesting about theirs is they found that law firms, lawyers and legal professionals overwhelmingly recognize the importance of legal technology to their, to the success of their firms, to the success of their practices. And yet basically only a third of them feel that their firms are well prepared for this kind of new era of legal technology. So there's still a broad sense across legal professionals that, we get it. We need to, use legal technology, and we need to innovate. But I'm not, that I'm not seeing it in my own firm, or that I'm not seeing that my own firm is really stepping up to this game. So I thought that was really interesting. I mean, again, it's sort of in furtherance of the point of their survey, they certainly did show that over the past year, the firms that had been advanced in embracing technology and using technology did a whole lot better. They tended to be, see their business continue to go up. They tended to be more profitable. They tended to have fewer glitches. No surprise there, I don't think. I I thought another interesting takeaway from the survey was just that, again, shouldn't be a big surprise, I don't think, but that the 91% now of clients, meaning, corporate legal clients, now say that they are asking, as part of they're asking firms to pitch for business, they're asking them specifically about their use of technology and how they're using technology. And again, I guess that shouldn't be a big surprise, but frankly, I've talked to some counsel in legal departments over the last year who still say, we're not really sure that's the most important thing for us, but it's clearly an important factor, and legal departments are looking for that in terms of their own firms are currently working with too, and having that conversation with them. I thought it was, again, just kind of interesting in that the takeaway from the survey this year wasn't that there's been some huge advance or leap in firms' adoption or use of technology, that there's maybe been a leap in their recognition of why they should be, but we're still trudging along on that front.
Well, this is what kills me about it. What is it going to take? A worldwide pandemic where everyone's displaced from their offices, you're forced to work remotely, you realize you have the technology to work remotely, you realize you can profit working remotely even more than you did in the prior year. And yet, well, we really like to see our associates work themselves to death in person. So what is wrong with these people? Like, that's more valuable to them, sort of watching other people suffer in person, than actually profiting. This is why I think that this allowing non-lawyers to own businesses, own law firms, actually makes sense. I don't think it's going to increase access to justice, but at least law firms are actually going to run efficiently, one would hope, compared to what's happening now.
I mean, I think I said this on a show a couple of weeks ago, but actual tech companies started the hoteling process of office work 15, 20 years ago. I know Oracle closed a whole facility and moved everybody to working virtually from that facility, stay home and we can just do this virtually. I'm pretty confident it was about 15 years ago. And lawyers are acting like this is an absurd thing that nobody would ever be able to do. I'm like, we're well past this.
Yeah.
Back then, we lived in a society where I'm trying to think of something that was popular 15 years ago, and now I'm totally blanking. I was trying to make a thing of how many years have passed, but I don't really even remember. Was 15 years ago any different? God, it's becoming all a blur.
Simpsons?
Yeah, it was. So that's the thing. That's been
15 years ago was before iPhones, right? It's 2007.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go.
Came out.
There you go. Yeah. So pre-iPhone, people were moving towards this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bob, I've definitely spoken to in-house legal departments, and they say okay, the GC may say, hey, we want our outside counsel to be more innovative and leveraging technology. But then when it comes down to the in-house attorney that's actually giving out the work and saying, hey, you'll get this work, they're not really asking about technology. Even if a firm is innovative, the work won't necessarily go to them, is maybe to the law firm that isn't really leveraging technology. So I think it comes down to that. The clients have to really say that an emphasis has to be made on technology, because I think in the report they mentioned, I forget it was law firms or corporate legal departments, despite saying hey, we saw technology was great during the pandemic, they said they can't get buy-in from leadership. And it's just still leadership can see hey, our people were profitable and everything, but they're still saying, but I'm not actually going to give you budget to focus on technology and improving on these efficiencies that we gained during the pandemic. So it comes down to leadership. And I think saying hey, you actually have to incentivize innovation in our organization, and also with the people that you're giving work, they also have to be leveraging technology.
Yeah.
That's why I think it could be interesting, though. If there's going to be a change here, I don't think it's going to be the lawyers who are driving it, particularly in corporations. We've talked to a few people in large scale projects to say, Well, for the first time, there's some people from corporate finance in the room. There's some people from procurement in the room, and they have different perspectives that the corporate legal department and law firm one-on-one consultations never really had before. And that's forcing us to think about things in a different way. Particularly, I mean, that's been a trend that all of us here have been tracking for like a decade now, is the corporate legal department being integrated more into the business as a whole. And as that continues to happen, that's probably what is going to force this change as much as anything else, is not the corporate attorneys, but the corporate finance people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was talking this week, you guys may have talked to him too, this Lexion company, another contract lifecycle management platform that raised $11 million this week. They've actually been around a couple of years, but they're kind of more focused on sort of the mid-market corporations, like slightly smaller corporations. And part of their pitch point is that they are kind of a simpler, leaner, more intuitive CLM platform without all the fat in it. But one of the points that they make, one of the points he made in our conversation is, he cited some Gartner findings that, a lot of these corporations that are buying these fancy CLM platforms we keep talking about aren't using, like, 2/3 of the functionality of these platforms. They just don't even, and even then the deployment of the platforms has been limited, and in some cases they're buying multiple platforms because they don't understand the capabilities of the platforms they already have. So as you get those, I don't know, finance and other people in the room, maybe that also means there's going to be more intelligent, not just a greater drive to using efficient technologies, but more intelligent decisions about what those technologies should be and what kinds of purchasing decisions to make.
And if you want a real incentive for law firms to push that, one of the investors in Lexion was Wilson Sonsini,
right?
Which is kind of interesting in and of itself. So
right.
If you put that kind of stake into it, then yeah, maybe they will push technology if they actually have a stake in the company.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It really is that it's not that the companies that the firms don't have access to all this stuff. They do. A lot of times they even have bought a lot of this stuff. It's adoption, understanding how it can be leveraged. These are the issues that are problematic. I do kind of trust that, at least at the elite level, everybody's on board with having at least invested in it, But
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's one time I talked to a mid-sized law firm. They had me come in and do a cloud presentation. I think I've talked about that before here, but one thing was that all the different people in the room, the different stakeholders, IT, office manager, technology committees, partners, all were asking different questions. The technology committee was saying, should we use the cloud? The IT people were saying, absolutely not. We don't want to use the cloud. And the office manager was saying, we don't have a choice. The software we're using is shelving their premises-based tool and moving to the cloud. We have to move to the cloud. So they're all on different pages. But at one point, the office manager said, well, we have this time tracking and billing software that we adopted last year, and none of the lawyers want to use it. So it was like they bought it, they had it, no one would use it. I don't know if they hadn't trained, but it was one of those examples where they have the software, they're just not utilizing it. And so it was essentially a waste of money. So I think that that's part of what happened. There was a question, what tech do you think that they should be adopting in the chat? It's an issue, it's an issue of not just of actual adoption, use of the tech, not just adoption of it or rolling it out into the firm, but the training and the buy-in from the employees. Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Joe also makes the point about what kinds of incentives will work, since just telling outside counsel, telling law firms they want them to reduce their outside counsel costs isn't a great incentive for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, we do see this sort of situation. Also, grabbing this from the chat, we do see this situation where specific clients demand specific solutions that may not be what the firm has, and then that's what that's what they'll do because that's what the client demands. But I've been in situations where I've been talking to folks who've said, oh, we had to do X because that's what the client demanded. And I was like, oh, so you did X instead of Y, which your firm already had. And they were like, our firm had Y? Like there's no understanding that's already there unless really forced to deal with it by a client, which is problematic. I do think there's a world, especially with the amount of compatibility that exists out there, that, clients wouldn't necessarily be demanding you have to use X if they knew that firms had facility with Y and could get results out of Y. The problem is there's no testing out of the firms proving we're able to deliver you this by using Y. We don't need X. We can deliver through Y. And they just don't do that because they don't even understand what they have.
Yeah. Should firms be marketing or advertising their tech stack more openly?
Right. I mean, maybe this brings us full circle back to what was a good idea about the Baker McKenzie experiment. Like, if you have people on staff that make it look like you understand what's going on technologically, maybe that communicates something to clients that you're trustworthy. Maybe that's a value add they bring beyond completing project X and then leaving for PwC.
Yeah.
Well,
If you could bring us back to the associate salary issue, then we could end the show. But until then, we're stuck in an endless loop.
Almost.
Monica raised an interesting issue in the chat, which is that it's impossible to get the lawyers to, of their own volition, attend training. And I think that goes back to a lot of the problems with the law firm business system overall, or business proposition, which is hourly billing instead of finding some, flat fee or alternative fee billing. And so when the lawyers are billing hourly, any training that they do that they don't somehow aren't either required to do, or somehow it counts towards hourly billing, for lack of a better way to describe it, they're not going to do it because it's a waste of their time, even if it's ultimately going to make them more efficient. Making them more efficient means that somehow that reduces the hours they're billing. So it's sort of this full circle problem. And it all has to do with the structure of the business of law firms and the way that they operate these days. And it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. Anybody have any rants or raves they want to raise this week?
I was just about to say, things that will change very soon is salaries. Boom, we're back to the beginning. No,
thank you.
I don't have any rants or raves. I guess I already told Bob this in an earlier conversation that he and I had this week, but I had complained on a previous iteration of this show about how there was somebody and his minions who were trolling me on Twitter about how dishonest I was and how I clearly didn't even bother to read the documents and blah, blah, blah. And it kept going, and it kept going through the weekend. And I was like, all right, well, the weekend, it's over. And then on Monday, there were like more of them. And I was like, these people are never going to stop. And then they suddenly stopped out of nowhere. And I was like, well, this seems suspicious that they stopped because they really had dragged it so long. Thankfully, Pacer was there to help me out. And I found that the federal judge felt that my read of the situation was much more accurate. And so that was why all of the harassment stopped. So if you're ever getting harassed, make sure a federal judge issues an order mocking the other side, and you're in good shape.
Sounds good. I forgot the other part of that conversation we had earlier this week was the idea of setting up our alternative press room or alternative something at the Alta conference, right?
Alta. I wasn't ready to announce it with this small group. I was going to wait till we had a full one again, but Alta.
Sorry to steal your thunder. But
no. I mean, I will preview it. Those of us who are going to ILTA who will not have press passes because they're not giving press passes to some of us. Others on here got them. For those, we're just going to set up our alternative version, and you can come see us in the hotel bar vendors. Tell all of your clients this, and they can all come visit us, and we'll set up meetings and just kind of roll through that way.
Yeah. Are we accepting bids for corporate sponsorships for these things?
If somebody wants to set us up in a suite, obviously that makes this a lot easier, but we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any rants or raves or anything they want to bring up before we wrap up?
I was just going to say, I literally booked my room at the Luxor earlier today and was looking at prices for suites, and suites are really not that expensive.
For Luxor, they're fine. For Luxor, we could do it, but the problem is Obviously, like that's requiring people to walk all the way over there. But if
But it's all
we could
connected.
get a lot.
You never have to go outside.
It is connected.
It's not too bad.
It's not that bad. And you get to walk by there's a great Irish bar along the way somewhere.
There is.
If there used to be, I don't know if anything's
There's
left
also
there.
a good Mexican restaurant in there too. Yeah, no, it's a good little stretch.
And no,
Yeah.
those underground things are dangerous. Last time I was in Vegas, some guy like acted like he was being nice and sucked me into his shop. And then he told me that my eyes were old and baggy and here, put this cream on. And it was really upsetting. So I don't think I want to do that again.
Happens to me every time I go to Vegas. All right. All right. Well, actually, I was going to make one cut. I don't know if it's a rant or a rave. I just wanted to note the passing of another legal tech startup. I'm always kind of sorry when I have to see legal tech startups die. So it's a rant that it had to die, but a rave for Anu, which is just got started about a year ago, and it was two people who had met with the trying to get startups going and realizing how hard it was for startups to get legal help. So they had this great idea of kind of connecting lawyers who wanted to provide legal help to startups with the startups who needed it, and in particular try and connect kind of the right lawyer with the right startup using a minor AI algorithm to match them. It was a good idea. They actually managed to make some matches over the course of the last year, but ultimately decided they just didn't have enough kind of recurring business to sustain it, and had to pull the plug. So RIP Anu. All right, well, thanks to everybody, and see y'all next week. Have a good weekend.
Bye,
Have a good one all.
everybody.
Here as well.